The air inside the warship's repair bay was thick with smoke and metal dust. Sparks flew as Eric tightened the final bolt on the damaged chest plate. He had done this 1,000 times before fixing armor, patching tech, saving soldiers, but today was different. Today, he was fixing her armor. Kalira stood tall, still as a statue, her dark purple armor scratched and scorched from battle. She was Zarnia, warrior race feared across the galaxy. She wasn't just any soldier. She was a commander, a legend among her kind. Eric, just a human technician, always felt small around her, and yet, she kept coming back to him for repairs. Always him. He worked carefully, trying not to show how nervous he was. His hands moved with precision. But his heart beat faster every time she glanced down at him with those glowing silver eyes. They were alone in the bay, and for a moment, it was quiet. The distant hum of the ship's engines faded into the background, just her, him, and the armor between them. Eric reached for the final piece, the shoulder plate. He slid it into place, then leaned in to lock the clamps. That's when it happened. A soft voice, barely above a whisper, slipped through the air. "Do you love me, human?" Eric's hands froze. His breath caught in his throat. He blinked, confused. Unsure if he heard her correctly, he slowly looked up, his eyes meeting hers. Kalira's face was calm, unreadable, but her gaze burned into him like fire. She wasn't smiling, not mocking, just ... Watching, for a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence grew heavier, stretching like a wire about to snap. Eric felt like the air had been pulled from the room. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He didn't know what to say. What she wanted to hear, was it a joke? A test? A mistake? He finally managed to whisper, then stopped. His brain screamed for logic. Zarnai didn't feel emotions, not the way humans did. They were warriors, trained for war, not love. So why would she ask something like that? Kalira didn't say anything else. She turned her head slightly, as if listening to a distant sound, then stepped away. The moment was gone, like a dream fading in daylight. She picked up her helmet, placed it under her arm, and walked toward the exit. Eric watched her go, heart still pounding. Before she disappeared into the shadows, she paused. Without turning around, she said, "The armor is good. Thank you." Then she was gone. Eric stood alone in the repair bay, confused and shaken. What just happened? That night he couldn't sleep. He replayed the moment again and again in his mind. Her voice, the question, the look in her eyes, it didn't make sense, none of it. But it felt real. More real than anything he had known in a long time, he thought. Back to when he first met her. It was during the Earth-Zarni Alliance War. Humans and Zarnay had been enemies, but now they were allies, uneasy allies. He had been assigned to their ship as a tech engineer, just a background guy. Kalira had been cold, distant, but respectful. Over time she started speaking to him more, waiting while he worked, asking questions about Earth, about music, about emotions. She never smiled, but her voice softened, little by little. Now she whispered something he couldn't ignore. Not in war, not in peace. The next morning Eric checked her armor again, curious if there had been a malfunction. Maybe a recording glitch, but everything was fine then. While inspecting the inner layers, he found something unusual, a sealed data chip hidden inside the joint casing. It wasn't part of the design. He plugged it into his tablet, but it was encrypted with Zarnay coding. Why would Kalira hide something in her own armor? Why would she come to him, a human, to fix it? Eric sat back, rubbing his face. He felt like he was standing at the edge of something massive, something personal, something dangerous, and deep inside, a voice whispered to him too, "You're not just a mechanic anymore." The next time he saw her, he'd have questions, but more than that. He needed answers, not just about her whisper, but about what she truly felt, and what it could mean for both their species. Because sometimes the smallest whisper can shake an entire galaxy. Eric couldn't stop thinking about her voice. That whisper kept echoing in his head like a ghost he couldn't shake. "Do you love me, human?" Those 5 words had cracked something inside him, something he didn't even know was there. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them, like they were a confession and a warning at the same time. He didn't see Kalira for 3 days, not in the repair bay, not in the halls, not even during ship meetings. It was unusual. She was never one to hide. She was always present, always watching, always prepared. Then, late one night, the alert lights flickered red. Infiltration detected, the alarm said. Eric ran to his post, thinking it was a boarding attack. But the threat wasn't outside the ship, it was inside. A creature from a failed experiment, part Zarnai, part machine, had broken containment. It tore through decks like paper, and soldiers fell trying to stop it. Eric was told to stay in engineering, but he couldn't. Not when he heard Kalira's name on the comms. Commander down, injured, Section 7. Without thinking, Eric grabbed his toolkit and ran. He followed the emergency path, dodging sparks and fallen panels. He reached Section 7 just as the monster roared. It stood 3 meters tall. Half of its body was raw metal. The other half, Zarnai muscle, and Kalira was lying on the floor, her armor broken, her blade just out of reach. Eric didn't hesitate. He ran straight at the thing, throwing a blinding plasma flare in its face. The creature shrieked, swinging wildly, but Eric slid beside Kalira and dragged her behind cover. She was bleeding, but alive, her eyes opened slowly, locking onto his face. "You came," she whispered. "You think I'd let you die after asking me that question?" He replied, trying to joke, but his hands were shaking, and she noticed. He patched her suit as best as he could under fire. She winced in pain but didn't complain. Then she did something strange. She reached into her armor, into the hidden part only she knew about, and she pulled out a small glowing shard, blue and humming with energy. "Take this," she said, voice weak but firm. "It's the core of the secret they fear." Eric didn't understand. "What is this?" he asked, but Kalira only looked at him and said, "If they find it, they'll erase both of us." The creature screamed again, getting closer. But just then, a squad of human and Zarnai soldiers arrived, blasting it from all sides. The beast collapsed under heavy fire, and the battle was over. But the questions had just begun. Kalira was taken to the med bay, unconscious. Eric sat outside, staring at the glowing shard in his hand. He knew one thing now: Kalira was hiding more than feelings. She was hiding truth. That night, when the halls were quiet and no one was watching, Eric accessed his personal workshop, locked the door, and placed the shard on the scanner. Lines of ancient code spilled across the screen's Zarnai script, but different, older. The scanner beeped twice, then translated a single line. "She is not full Zarnai." Eric stared at the words, unable to breathe. That's why she was different. That's why she whispered those words. That's why she trusted him, a human. Kalira wasn't just a soldier. She was a secret hidden in armor. Half Zarnai, half something else. And now, Eric was the only one who knew. But someone else wanted that secret. In the shadows of the ship, a hidden watcher activated a silent beacon. A red dot blinked in the darkness, sending a message across the stars. "Target has shared the shard. Commence elimination." The ship was quiet, too quiet. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that hides something dangerous, something watching. Eric sat in his private workshop, staring at the shard Kalira gave him. The blue light pulsed gently, like it had a heartbeat of its own. He hadn't slept in almost 2 days. Not after reading the translation. "She is not full Zarnai." He thought that was the end of it. But something kept pulling him back, like the shard wanted him to see more. So he connected it again, this time bypassing normal systems and using an old Earth decoding tool. Lines of code scrolled across his screen, faster than he could read. Then, the screen flashed white. A voice began to speak, not a message, but a recording. "To the child of both worlds," it said, "you are not alone." Eric froze, listening carefully. The voice was human, but with an accent he didn't recognize, soft, female. Almost like a lullaby wrapped in static, the message continued. If you are hearing this, it means the secret lives on. Your father was a warrior. Your mother a scientist. You carry both their legacies. Eric leaned closer, heart racing. It wasn't a random file. It was meant for Kalira. A message from her parents, people who had risked everything to create something the universe wasn't ready for. He downloaded the file and sealed it behind layers of encryption. No one else could see it, not yet. Suddenly, his console flickered. Unauthorized ping detected. Someone was trying to access his system. Someone on the ship. He yanked the data cord out, shut down the power, and backed away. They were watching him, and now they knew he knew. He ran straight to the medbay. Kalira was still unconscious, breathing slow but steady. He reached for her hand, whispering, "You weren't wrong to trust me. I'll protect it, and I'll protect you." But someone else had other plans meanwhile, in the shadows of the ship. The signal had been sent. A red-eyed droid moved through the maintenance tunnels like a ghost. It was silent, cloaked, built to erase secrets. Its mission was clear: retrieve the shard, or kill the carrier, but this droid wasn't acting alone. Far away, in the command center of a hidden Zarnai base, a cold figure watched through a live feed. High Commander Thal Serax, the one who ordered Kalira's birth, erased from all records. His voice was like iron when he spoke. "She is awakening. The human must be silenced." Back in Eric's world, he hid the shard inside an old lunch container, sealed it with a false radiation label, and carried it like trash. If anyone scanned it, they'd skip it. As he passed through the corridor, he noticed something strange. People were staring longer than usual, whispering. The ship's assay cameras were following him just a little too smoothly. Eric knew this wasn't paranoia. He had touched something forbidden, and now the system was turning against him. Later that night, he returned to the workshop only to find it burned, everything gone, tools melted, data cores fried. Whoever came wasn't just searching. They wanted to erase every trace. That's when he heard the sound like footsteps, a sharp breath. He turned, ready to fight. But it wasn't the enemy, it was her. Kalira stood there, in a recovery suit, her body weak but her eyes burning bright. "You opened it," she said quietly. Eric nodded. "You trusted me, I had to." She stepped closer. "There's more you haven't seen yet," she whispered. "The message." "It wasn't just for me," Eric frowned. "What do you mean?" he asked. Kalira looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her collar and pulled out a second shard, smaller, red and flickering like a dying flame. "You and I," she said, "were meant to finish what they started." Behind them, the ship's lights dimmed, and deep within the circuitry, the hidden signal pulsed again, calling someone from the dark corners of the galaxy. Asterisk. The ship was no longer a home. It had become a cage, a machine with eyes in every wall and secrets in every breath. And now, Eric and Kalira were running out of time. They moved through the lower levels, areas not listed on the crew maps, old maintenance shafts, decommissioned, weapon bays, places even the cameras had forgotten. Kalira walked slowly, still recovering, but her grip on the shard never loosened. The blue light from it reflected in her eyes that now looked more human than ever. She wasn't the same soldier who once stood tall in armor without emotion. She was something in between. And the war inside her was just beginning. Eric kept glancing at her. He wanted to ask so many things. But it was Kalira who finally spoke. "My mother was a human biologist," she said quietly. "She worked for the Zarnai under peace contracts, studied genetics, language, culture." Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. "My father was a general, pure Zarnai, loyal to the Empire." Eric listened, stunned. This was no small secret. This was Forbidden's history. "When they found out she was pregnant," Kalira said, "they told her the child had to be removed." Eric's heart sank. "They wanted to erase you," he said, his voice soft. Kalira nodded. "But she ran." She stared at the walls, like they held memories only she could see. "She hid me on a science outpost, gave me a Zarnai Identity, said my mother had died. Only my father raised me, strict, cold. Never told me the truth. Eric couldn't imagine the pain, all this time. Kalira had been fighting a war for a side that would have killed her just for being born. I only found the truth a year ago, she continued. When I heard the old voice recording hidden in my armor, she looked at Eric. I thought I could bury it. Focus on the mission, forget who I really was. A pause. But then you started. Fixing my armor, Eric smiled faintly. And you decided to break something bigger than metal. Kalira's eyes narrowed in amusement. You never talked like a soldier, she said. You talked like a human, and I liked that, before. Eric could respond. The floor shook. A deep rumble echoed through the corridor. An announcement crackled over the comms. Unauthorized escape detected in engineering. Search and terminate. Eric cursed under his breath. They found us. They ran again, deeper into the belly of the ship, where the air smelled like rust and forgotten things. There, behind an old panel, they found something Kalira had hidden long ago, an encrypted holodisk. Eric powered it up, and a figure appeared. In flickering blue light, it was her mother, human, with tired eyes and a strong voice. If you've found this, it means they're hunting you, the message began. But you are not alone. The resistance still lives. Earth still remembers. Find the ones who remember me, and they will protect you both. Both, the word hung in the air like a bell. Eric looked at Kalira, confused. What does she mean, both? Kalira swallowed hard. I wasn't the only hybrid created, Eric stepped back. There's another? Yes, she whispered. But I don't know who. Or where. Before they could say more, a loud hiss came from above ceiling vents opening. Red drones dropped down, armed with stingers and scan beams. But these weren't standard security bots. They had the symbol of Thal Sarax the High. Commander, Kalira's father, the same one who had hunted her mother, the same one who might still believe Kalira was his perfect Zarnai daughter, loyal and emotionless. The betrayal burned in her chest like fire. He sent them, she growled. He knows everything now. Eric grabbed her hand. Then it's time he knows you're not afraid of him. They fought their way through, using everything shards, scrap weapons and fury, as they escaped through a docking vent. Kalira looked back one last time. This ship raised me, she said. But it also lied to me, Eric nodded. We'll find the truth. As they launched into deep space aboard a stolen pod, one question echoed louder than ever. If Kalira was only one part of the secret, who was the other? And somewhere, in another corner of the galaxy, another hybrid woke up with a scar that matched hers. And the galaxy trembled, because bloodlines were meant to unite, but betrayals, they were meant to burn. The pod shook violently as it entered the shadow side of Terra's moon. Engines sputtered, warning lights blinked red, and smoke poured from the rear panel. But Eric held the controls steady, his eyes locked on the landing strip below, beside him. Kalira gripped the armrest, pale but alert. She didn't speak, but her breathing was sharp and ready. They weren't running anymore. They were heading towards something old, something hidden. The pod slammed down, metal groaning, sparks flying. They had landed barely. Outside, silence wrapped the moon's surface like a blanket. No patrols, no scanners, no lights, only darkness and dust. Eric opened the hatch and stepped out into the cold. The stars above looked clearer here, as if they were watching, waiting. Kalira followed, eyes scanning the terrain. She paused, pointing to a rocky ridge ahead. There, she said, beneath the crater wall. They moved quickly, their footprints disappearing behind them in the gray dust. Behind the ridge, half buried in rock, stood an ancient human bunker, rusted, forgotten, but still pulsing faintly with life. Eric entered the code Kalira had recovered from her mother's holodisk. The door clicked, then slid open with a long sigh. Inside, the air was dry and stale, but breathable. Lights flickered on dim orange ones, old Earth tech. The bunker hadn't seen visitors in years, maybe decades. but someone had kept it alive. They explored slowly, room by room, rows of empty bunks, cracked display screens, and broken weapons. Then they found it a chamber lined with memory cores, marked with the symbol of the old Earth resistance. Kalira stepped forward, her fingers brushing the dusty panel. "This is where my mother worked," she whispered. "She sent research here. Experiments, warnings, maybe even messages to other hybrids." Eric connected the shard to the terminal. The screen flickered to life, showing files too large to be random. "Project Unity," he read aloud. Kalira's eyes widened. "That was her dream," she said, "to unite humans and Zarnai. Not through war, but through blood." Before Eric could reply, a new file autoplayed, a video, timestamped 25 years ago. A younger version of Kalira's mother stood in the lab, holding a small baby wrapped in blue cloth. "This is Kalira," she said, "the firstborn of peace." She paused, then looked directly into the camera. "But not the last, if you're watching this. The second one is out there. I couldn't protect both. I had to split them." Eric leaned in. "Split them?" Kalira stared at the screen, frozen. "That means I have a sibling," the video continued. "I sent the second to a hidden colony. Beyond the black stars, the records are here, encrypted. I pray they find each other before the Empire does." Eric backed away from the screen. Now everything had changed. The secret wasn't just about Kalira's blood. It was about two hybrids, separated at birth, destined to find each other. Before they could react, the bunker lights flickered violently. Motion sensors triggered. Alarms screeched. Something had followed them. A low rumble shook the ground, and the wall cameras went black. "They found us," Kalira whispered. "Not them," Eric said, pointing at the corner monitor. The screen showed a new figure entering the outer gate, tall, armored, and alone. Not Sarnay, not human, but both. Kalira stepped closer to the screen, her hand trembling. "He has the same eyes," she said quietly. "The same scar." The screen glitched once, then the face appeared in full view. The stranger looked into the lens as if he could see them. Then he spoke, voice calm but sharp. "You're late, sister." Asterisk. The bunker doors groaned open again. Dust swirled around the entrance as the tall figure stepped inside. He moved with precision like a soldier, but with no armor clanking, no sound of weapons. Just silence and presence. Kalira stood still, her breath tight in her throat. Eric stayed close, unsure if they were facing a savior or a threat. The figure removed his helmet. Underneath was a face that looked like Kalira's, but older. Sharper, colder, silver eyes, marked cheek, dark hair cut military short. He looked at her as if he'd seen her 1,000 times in his dreams. "You really are her," he said, voice low. "I didn't believe it until now." Kalira's voice was barely above a whisper. "You're the second." "I'm Zirin," he replied, stepping forward. "Second-born of Project Unity, raised in shadows, trained for war." Kalira glanced at Eric, then back to Zirin. "Why now? Why show yourself?" Zirin looked around the bunker, then toward the flickering monitor. "Because the Empire just declared war on Terra's moon, and they think you're leading a rebellion." Eric stepped forward, confused. "But we haven't done anything yet." Zirin smiled faintly. "You ran, you survived, and worst of all, you remembered." He pulled a small device from his belt and placed it on the table. It projected a 3D map, multiple dots lit up in red and blue. "Earth isn't dead," he said. "It's just sleeping. Scattered, hiding, but not gone." The map zoomed in, revealing dozens of rebel hideouts across moons, stations, and deep space. "They've been waiting for a sign," Zirin said. "Waiting for Unity to rise again." Kalira shook her head. "I'm not a leader, I'm just surviving." "But they don't need a leader," Zirin said. "They need a symbol." He pointed to the screen, where her mother's face had once played. "She was that symbol, and now it's you." Kalira turned away, overwhelmed. The truth was heavier than any armor. Her whole life had been war, orders, and silence. Now people wanted her to speak. To stand, to inspire, Eric walked beside her, his voice gentle. "You've already started something," he said. "You made them chase you. Fear you, you made them panic." He placed his hand over hers. "Maybe you're not just the firstborn of peace. You might be the first to fight for it too, outside." A storm of dust began to rise, enemy ships entering the atmosphere. The time for hiding was over. Zirin handed Kalira a new set of armor, sleek, hybrid tech, designed for both Zarnay and human blood. "No more running," he said. "We fight or we fall." Eric looked at the control board, his fingers dancing. Across the old Earth system, he activated the long-range beacon, a message encoded with Kalira's DNA and her mother's voice. It echoed through the stars. "This is Kalira, born of two worlds. We remember, we rise." Across distant colonies, old rebels paused, eyes widened, fists clenched. The signal had returned. Suddenly, warning sirens wailed. The Empire's ships had arrived, black and sleek, their weapons armed. They didn't come to negotiate. They came to erase the last trace of Project Unity. Zirin took position at the entrance, charging a plasma rifle. Kalira stepped beside him, her eyes no longer afraid. Eric stayed behind the console, unlocking turret control and defense drones. "Buried beneath the moon's surface. Together?" she asked, looking at Zirin. "Together," he nodded, as the sky above burned red, and the moon shook beneath their feet. The first battle of the uprising began, not for a planet, not for a flag, but for a future where two species could finally stand as one. The sky above Terra's moon was on fire. Crimson trails streaked across the stars as Empire ships rained plasma onto the surface. Explosions shook the ground, sending waves of dust into the bunker halls. But deep inside the mountain, three hearts beat as one: Eric, Kalira, and Zirin. Not as soldiers, not as weapons, but as symbols of a future that refused to die. Kalira moved like lightning through the falling rubble, her new armor glowing with hybrid energy. Zirin fought at her side. Calm, precise, deadly, Eric stayed behind. The main console, fingers racing over controls, activating defense turrets and AI drones, buried deep within the moon's surface. The rebels had answered the signal. Across hidden bases and forgotten colonies, ships launched, weapons charged. People stood up again. The Empire was powerful, but now for the first time in decades, it was afraid. Inside the bunker, the main defense reactor flickered. Eric's voice cracked through the "Power's draining fast. Shields won't hold much longer." Kalira didn't answer. She was staring through the blast window, eyes locked on a black carrier ship descending slowly. It wasn't just any ship, it was his, Thalsarax the Zarnai warlord. Her father, the man who gave her life, then tried to erase it. Now, he had come to finish the job himself. "Let me go," Kalira said, turning to Zirin. "I need to face him alone." Zirin started to protest, but Eric raised a hand. "She's not asking." Kalira walked through the fire and steel as the outer gates fell behind her. The battlefield cleared as Thalsarax landed, stepping out in full ceremonial armor, tall, cold, flawless. But even he looked surprised when he saw her. "You survived," he said. "I expected strength, not rebellion." Kalira stopped a few steps away. "I learned strength from you," she replied. "But I learned purpose from her." He said nothing, so she continued. "You could have changed the future. You chose to fear it instead." His face hardened. "You're not my daughter." Kalira's voice didn't tremble. "No," she said. "I'm my mother's daughter." Then it began. Zarnai steel against hybrid fury. The ground shook as they clashed, blades lighting the darkness, sparks flying with every strike. She was faster, he was stronger, but she had something he never did hope. Inside the bunker, Eric watched the monitors, hands trembling. "Her vitals are dropping," he muttered. "Kalira, come back." But Kalira kept fighting, even as her left arm failed, even as her armor cracked. She stared into the eyes of the one who raised her in silence, and whispered, "You taught me how to kill, but I taught myself how to feel." Her final strike was not through his heart, but through his weapon core. His blade shattered. His systems fried. He fell not dead, but defeated, not by strength, but by truth. She collapsed beside him, blood mixing with dust. Zirin reached her first. Kneeling beside her, Eric followed. Dropping to his knees, grabbing her hand, she was fading. Too much blood. Too many wounds. Eric held her close, voice shaking. You did it. You changed everything. She smiled faintly. I just remembered who I was. Her voice dropped to a whisper, the kind that started it all. Do you love me, human? Eric didn't freeze this time. He didn't hesitate. He leaned in, pressed his forehead to hers, and said, Yes, I always did. Her fingers tightened in his hand, just for a second. Then, stillness, silence fell. But not for long. Across the galaxy, Kalira's story spread like fire. A half-human warrior who faced death for peace. The rebellion had its symbol now. And her name lived on not in war, but in whispers.